Garden Success is brought to you in part by Martha's Bloomers, offering an expansive collection of plants and tools for the gardener, a boutique store filled with art and home decor, and an award-winning full-service restaurant featuring handcrafted meals and desserts. Martha's Bloomers, located right off Highway 6 in Navasota.
Welcome to Garden Success with Stephen Brueggerhoff, the show designed to help you have a bountiful garden and a beautiful landscape. And now, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension horticulturist Stephen Brueggerhoff.
Well, howdy everyone, and welcome to Garden Success. I'm really glad you're joining us today. I'm sure it's going to be a beautiful day, but I wouldn't know because this is a pre-recorded program. We're glad that you're joining us, supporting Garden Success as well as KAMU for the outstanding work that we do for our community. We'll be coming back next week live with Garden Success. In the meantime, I'm very pleased and honored to have invited Nick McKenna. Nick is the Assistant Athletics Director for the sports fields here on campus for Texas A&M University. But before we get to Nick, just letting y'all know if you have any questions or comments about the program, please feel free to email them in at gardensuccess@tamu.edu. Again, we'll be coming back live next week with you, and of course, we'd love to hear your challenges in your garden, but your successes as well. We want to make sure that you're getting great information so you can improve the skills that you already have. Well, Nick, I'd like to welcome you to the program. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to be here.
Excellent. Now, Nick, I did a little bit of reading up on you, and I'll be asking you some questions. We want to know a little bit about you. How long have you been with the university?
So this is actually my second stint with Texas A&M. I was actually here for just under 3 years in the early 2000s, kind of right out of college. It was my first job out of college. My wife actually got her master's degree from here at A&M, and then when she finished, we made the tough decision to leave the university, so we picked up and left, and we were gone for 6 years, and then we had the opportunity to move back in 2011. So if you add the two combined services together, I'm right around 15 and a half, 16 years now with athletics.
That's quite a stretch, actually.
Yeah, it's pretty scary now. Just I start looking around the room if we have like an all-staff meeting in athletics, and I'm like, man, I think I'm in like the top 20 people in tenure now within athletics, just the number of changes we've had in recent years, and people have opportunities to move on. So it's like I'm kind of the old guy on campus now, and in athletics, it's a little intimidating.
Well, it helps to have that memory, and that experience here at the university. It helps everything to be successful, with your experience and longevity with the program itself. I saw in your bio that you were a field and facility coordinator for Virginia Tech University for a little while as well.
Yeah, and that was during that was part of the stint of that 6-year period where I was gone from A&M. I'm originally from Iowa, born and raised. I grew up on a farm in Iowa, and then so right when we left here, we went back there for a couple of years to get back close to family, and then I had the itch to get back kind of into the sports fields, and I'd always contemplated going back to graduate school myself. So we actually picked up and moved across the country to Virginia, and we spent 4 years at Virginia Tech, and I worked on a master's degree. My wife started working on her PhD, and at the same time I had an opportunity to work full-time for their athletic department too, maintaining the field similar to what we do here. So spent 4 terrific years in Blacksburg, Virginia, and got to experience another university and a new geographic location, and kind of round out my experiences as far as working in the green industry, because I very intentionally made that choice to go there because having grown up in Iowa, I had a northern climate where I dealt with a lot of like cool season turf grasses, and then obviously having spent just under 3 years at Texas A&M, a very warm climate dealing with primarily warm season grasses, and then Virginia Tech falls into the section of the country known as the transition zone, where we joke all grasses grow equally poor. So just depending on the weather and the year, if it's a warm year, it's great for the Bermuda grasses in warm season. But if it's cool, it's better for the cool season grasses like your bluegrasses or ryegrasses. And so there's always that challenge there, but intentionally chose to go there because I felt like by doing so, I would put myself in a situation for my career that no matter where I wound up, I would be comfortable with my ability and my background to succeed, regardless of geographic location, was kind of the intent behind that decision.
I went to the University of Washington for two reasons. One, just to get out of Texas and see what else there was, but the other, that the program was very outstanding that I participated in it. And I agree with that. I had it was very enriching for me to experience something outside of my comfort zone. I learned a lot when I was there, but it came back.
Yeah, I mean, the neat thing, I'll still say, like, Blacksburg is probably one of my favorite towns to, like I said, I'm a small town farm boy, so like Bryan College Station alone is bigger than any town I ever thought I would want to live in. Now I'm very fortunate. It's centered around the university, so it still feels like it's a small town. So like from that standpoint, like we didn't lock our doors at night. That's like how small town and safe of a community it felt like. But the neat thing is like the background and history of Virginia Tech is very similar. Like there were so many similarities between the two universities. Like they're both agricultural and military institutions originally in their background. Like Virginia Tech has a Corps of Cadets, and so there were so many cross similarities between the two. It almost felt like kind of a small extension of Texas A&M in a way.
Oh, that's fantastic. So it was familiar.
Yes, yeah. Very familiar, very comfortable, amazing people that I got to work with. That was the other thing. There's a professor at Virginia Tech who was kind of one of the preeminent experts in the sports field industry by the name of Dr. Mike Goatley. So that was another major influence in why I chose to go there, was getting the opportunity to work with him and kind of learn from him.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's great when you have a mentor that's, available for you, especially when they see that passion in an individual like yourself,
Yeah.
So how many fields were you responsible for when you were at Tech?
So, I mean, very similar. Like we had a team of individuals. There were 4 full-time staff members, and we oversaw, similar to what I have here, like counting myself, I have 6 full-time staff members, and we oversee every playing surface that the athletic department has. So everything from football, baseball, softball, soccer. Like at Virginia Tech, we had lacrosse, track and field, a lot of the landscape areas. So very similar situation to kind of what I have here, where I've got football, baseball, softball, soccer, track, tennis, landscapes in and around the facilities.
Well, just to give our listener a little bit of a scope for those who are familiar with Texas A&M University, what Nick is mentioning is they're responsible for Kyle Field, the Coolidge practice fields, Olson Field at Bluebell Park, Ellis Field, stop me if I'm off the track,
Nope.
Davis Diamond, Anderson Track and Field Complex, and E.B. Cushing Track, and then the Aggie Softball Complex with 6 FTEs.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then we have a decent number of students. Like that's the other neat thing is we create opportunities for Texas A&M students to come out and get practical real world experience. Half of my crew, like right now, we have more students than we normally do. Thank goodness, though, just based on some things that have transpired here with our fall event load. And so like right now I have 14 students that work for us based around their class schedule. Of those 14, 7 of them are actually turfgrass science students that are in our turfgrass science program here at Texas A&M. And so they're getting everyday hands-on real-world practical experience in the career field of their choosing. The other portion of them, they're just kind of a mix of different majors, whether it's horticulture, sport management. I think I have an agricultural leadership major. But once again, like kids that either just have a propensity or an affinity for working outside, or like the sport management kids, a lot of them are just looking for an opportunity to kind of get their foot in the door somewhere in athletics. And then, when I hire them, I tell them, like, if you want to use this to leverage and work your way into another area of our athletic department, if you show up and work hard for us and you're dependable, like I'm going to give you a glowing recommendation, and I'm going to go do everything I can to help create that opportunity for them. So it's mutually beneficial. Like we couldn't do what we do without them. But I hope they're also benefiting from it as well as much as we are.
Well, I think so. Just providing that opportunity for those young minds and those just beginning their career, I think that's outstanding. You're giving back,
Yeah, that's the goal. It's pay it forward. It's not about me. It's about we. And when we work with athletics, a lot of what we do is a service industry. Like the idea is that we're not getting the recognition we want that to fall on the student athletes and the teams, and we're trying to work in the background to make them be successful. So that's kind of the end goal.
Well, you and your staff are rock stars in my book.
Well, thank you.
I know what you're doing out there.
The staff's a rock. My staff is a rock star. I will give them that. So, despite my leadership, they've managed to overcome. But no, I'm very blessed. We have a great team that we've been able to put together, and I always joke we're kind of a little bit of a dysfunctional family. We sometimes spend more time with each other than we do our own families, and just like you get annoyed and you'll have little arguments, but at the same time, like, we love being around each other and we enjoy what we do every day. And not everybody can say that when they come to their job every day. So the fact that I get to call Kyle Field part of my kind of my office is pretty neat. Kind of honestly, we probably take it for, not even probably, I know we take it for granted. So it's always a good reminder when you get, the young kid that walks in there for the first time, and you just watch their face and how overwhelmed they are about, how big it is, or, somebody reaches down, they walk in and they kind of like, they're like petting the grass, and they're like, is this real? And you're like, yeah, it is. So it's kind of, those are good subtle reminders of what we get to do, but we often take it for granted just because we're in and out of it every single day, and just kind of the novelty or the specialty of it, you become a little numb to it.
Well, it can be overwhelming. I was on a horticulture retreat. So I'm a horticulture agent here in Brazos County, and myself and fellow horticulture agents, we get together every year. And I think it was 3 years ago, we were actually doing it here at the mothership, right? And we went over to Kyle Field, and you may have been there giving us the tour of the field.
I think I probably did.
Yeah. So I understand that feeling of awe, and it's awesome to be on that field and just kind of look at the scope of everything, but then having an explanation, a tour of what y'all are actually doing out there, that really brought it home.
Yeah, I do give a decent number of tours, and once again, like, for me, it's about spreading knowledge and giving back, and making people understand and recognize like what all goes into it. So anything I can do to bring attention and recognition to my team, because they're out there working every day, sweating their butts off in the Texas heat. And so I try and use that as an opportunity to not only highlight them, but then also highlight the profession in my industry, just because it cannot commonly be taken for granted, and people don't realize how much science and background knowledge goes into something as simple as maintaining a sports field. The average person is like, well, I take care of my home lawn. How hard can it be? So it's combating like that train of thought, because how many people go out and have 300-pound linemen essentially wage war against each other on their lawn week after week. And I'm not likening the game of football to a war in any way, shape, or form, but it's a violent sport. And you start doing that to your home lawn maintenance becomes a whole lot harder all of a sudden.
That's right. A lot of compaction out there.
Correct.
That's for sure. Well, I'm really impressed with the care that you and your team are taking care of for those fields. Like you said, we don't get to see what happens behind the scenes. As long as it looks great and performs great, that's really all that matters. But you and I discussed this just really briefly prior. The work that y'all do makes those assists or supports the work that the athletes are doing on the field. If something goes wrong on your end, it can mess with their day, it can mess with their game, their performance as well. So the work that you do in keeping those fields as workable for those athletes is just amazing and outstanding.
Yeah, I mean, our top focus is always I kind of usually break it down into a threefold thing. Safety and playability are our top two priorities at all times. Basically, we want to make sure that our student athletes can go out there and perform and have minimal to no worry about the playing surface itself causing an injury to them. And then secondly, we don't want that playing surface to impact the outcome of the game in a negative way. Does a player fall down and slip at a crucial moment because the turf grass didn't hold up? Something along that line. So those are our top two priorities. But then obviously, we're in a national spotlight, especially in today's world of the ESPN contracts and SEC network. And it used to be when I was here my first stint around is we maybe had two of our home football games might be on national television, like that, and everybody got to see. Well, in today's world, people can tune into every single sporting event that we host. So we're performing for a national audience every single day, and then that's not counting the 108,000 fans that are in the stadium. And you never know. That might be the only game that person gets to come to, or it's the first and only game they ever come to at Kyle Field. And so I always say a close third to those first two characteristics is the aesthetics of it. Like, we want it to be something special. We want that wow factor that when they walk, out the doors of the stands to their seat, and they look across the field, that it's, it's something spectacular. We always say in our, we're in the memory of helping people create memories.
Yeah.
Whether that's out on the field or whether that's a fan in the stand, or the fan that rushes the field after a big win, unfortunately. Those are all memories. Those are core memories that people are creating, and hopefully, it's a father and a son that get to experience something at Kyle Field together that, that carries, that's something they carry the rest of their life, is kind of the hope.
Oh, it sure is. I mean, I can attest to that from my own personal experiences. So I'm old enough to actually be in the Astrodome when it was actively used,
Yep.
right? Yeah, and I carry away those memories of attending a football game with my dad, and it was just, we saw Evel Knievel, which has nothing to do with turf, right? In there jumping buses, but those memories. You're right. It does create memories, and it does support that pride that we have, and that we're imparting to the world.
Yeah, I also look like part of my job is I'm an extension of the Texas A&M brand. Like, I'm hoping I'm helping build and carry the Texas A&M brand, not just representing Texas A&M Athletics, but Texas A&M University as a whole. So when people think about us, they think of us as a preeminent institutional or learning institution. So it's that perception of Aggies everywhere. We want every former student of Texas A&M to be able to see, whether it's Kyle Field, Olson Field, Ellis, Davistown, whatever it may be. We want that to be a point of pride for them, and so that's the other aspect of why we work so hard to make sure that the fields look and perform at a high level throughout every playing season is our goal.
Well, I do have I have many questions for you, but one is professional development. So when I was looking at your background, you're currently, do you still hold a position, an administrative position or executive position in a professional organization?
I did. I'm still technically on our board of directors for our local state chapter of the Sportsfield Management Association. I was on the national board. I just finally rolled off last year after 8 years serving on that board, but had worked all the way from just being a director representing all colleges and universities within the association, and then I was fortunate enough to be elected into the executive track of the entire association, where I worked my way up and served all the way as the association president, getting to represent sports field managers at all levels, not just colleges and universities, but K through 12, Parks and Rec, professional, academic members, but kind of got to represent them in our professional association at a national level, which was a very unique experience, and something like I hold in very high regard, because you mentioned having mentors. Basically all of the primary mentors for me in this profession all had some sort of major role that they served within that association. So it was modeled for me very early that giving back and serving and representing our profession and our employers at a national level was something that I aspired to do based on the example they set for me. But a couple of them were former presidents of the association. So it was kind of a surreal moment for me to be able to say, like, that was a goal that was modeled for me as a college kid, and I set aspirations to, and then to see it come to fulfillment was pretty special.
Oh, I'm sure. It provides that connectivity to the rest of the nation and what our other colleagues are doing in their field as well. Having said that, are there standards that are set, or a national standard that's set for recreation and athletic fields?
So there are and there aren't, and it's really dependent upon level of play. So like the NFL, The NFL actually has field performance standards that their fields are required to meet before every single event. We do some of that testing at like a collegiate level, but it's not regulated yet. It's not where it's a mandate from the NCAA coming in saying like you must be testing for these things. But for us, it's one of those things that it helps us manage the field better, because we're taking what is a lot of people view as an art, where it's a touch and a feel, and you just make decisions based on what you see and what you know and what you experience. Well, we're able to collect data and put numbers to things, and so when you start to be able to collect data and put data to something, you then create repeatable measures. And so like I can go take that data and say Kyle Field played perfectly this last weekend. So I have that data set, and I say, okay, so if I can figure out how to replicate that and have all these metrics in that exact same range, I can recreate that field. And then I provide that consistent, safe, playable surface so that from the Notre Dame game to the Texas game, Kyle Field hopefully performs the exact same for the athletes. And it's just one less thing that they have to even, the goal is the athletes never even have to think about the field. Like they just go out and perform.
Oh, that's excellent. And what you're doing is sharing best practices as well. That just kind of goes hand in hand with that. Well, to get into a little bit of the technical aspects of the fields itself. So, for instance, Kyle Field, how much of that profile is sand?
So basically, every single one of our major sporting fields is actually built on a sand root zone, and we select sand very purposely. Some, they're all modeled after the United States Golf Association green specification. So back in, I think it was the 60s, the USGA wanted to figure out a way to improve and make putting greens more consistent, because you just had this hodgepodge of, the grass was planted in whatever soil was there, or people pushed stuff up, or you amended it. So they wanted to figure out a way, how do we make them consistent and uniform, like, across multiple golf courses, across multiple areas of the country. And so they came up with this USGA specification for a sand-based root zone. And we very purposely use sand for a number of reasons. One, because sand doesn't compact as readily as a native soil with, silt and clay also in it. Two, sand drains readily. And so it allows us to basically manipulate and control things. And, one of the worst things you can do is oversaturate a plant. So if it's sitting in water, it's not going to be healthy, whether that's turf grass, whether that's your home garden plants, whatever it may be. Now, granted, there are some plants that prefer a drier climate. So basically, all of our fields are designed with worst case weather situations in mind. So we want them, regardless of what the weather may be, if we get a tropical storm, if we have, a hurricane blowing in and it rains 6 inches the day before a game, the idea is that we build this field on the front end, and yes, it costs us a little bit more money to over-design it and prepare it for something like that. But when you put it into perspective of the amount of money that a single football game brings, not only to the athletic department, but to the Bryan College Station community as a whole, the last thing we need is for a game to get canceled, because then that has an economic impact on all levels. And so Kyle Field is built with the root zone is entirely sand-based. We have 11 inches of sand that the field is growing on, and that was all based on scientific testing and the sand source that we selected from. So we actually get our sand from a pit up in right outside of Crockett, basically. So it's pretty close, relatively available, affordable, but based on, not all sands are not all the same. Like, a lot of people don't even realize that. So like, you really can get down into the particle size breakdown as far as like very coarse, medium, fine, very fine sands, and then that's not even talking about like the shapes and sphericity and angularities of the sand. So it's not just go to Galveston, dredge some sand up off the Gulf Coast beach, bring it back and build. It's these sands are selected and tested to perform how we want. And so if I tried to build Kyle Field somewhere else, I'm going to end up with a different sand, and based on that sand, I might end up with a different depth of sand profile. So it was all based, we took that sand, we had it tested. The soil testing lab came back and said, okay, in order to perform how you're wanting it to perform, we designed these fields to do something that we called it's a perched water table
Yes.
is what we're trying for. And so, not to go too deep into the science of it, but with the cohesion factor of water, it will hold together to a certain point. So basically, the blessing and the challenge of the sand root zone is it doesn't hold water, but I also need it to hold some water so that I can grow a plant. And so we've designed it with, between the drainage combination, the sand type, the profile depth of that sand, we build it to where it will actually do what we call it perches, where if we fill that reservoir full of water, gravitational water free drains to a certain point, and then the cohesion factor between the water itself and those sand particles holds water at a certain level. And then if we pour more water into that system, free gravitational flow lets that water flow through again. And so it's kind of that balance of like, we want it to drain, but we also need it to hold enough water that we can grow grass and maintain it. And so it's all these different factors that come together that we're trying to balance and perfect.
That's fantastic. And is there any kind of underlayment on those fields? Is there like a flexible plastic? I've seen these large sectionals that are like little cells, almost like a honeycomb.
So we've got two different styles. We've got a couple of fields that are designed after a USGA putting green, and so they've got 4-inch drainage tiles that are on 15-foot centers, and the subgrade is sloped to move water to get to those drain tiles, and then you've got a pea gravel layer that separates the sand from, it protects those drain tiles, it keeps the sand separate from them. That's a USGA system. We also have a large number of our fields are what's called an airfield drainage system, and so that's what you're referencing to, and it's designed to perform. It's designed to do the same thing that the USGA system does, where it's going to create that perched water table. It's just a different method of getting there. So like in place, we still have the subsurface grading, the drain lines built into the ground, not as many. And then on top of that, we actually lay an impermeable pond liner so that it forces all the water to get to those drain lines. On top of that liner, then, instead of a 4-inch pea gravel layer, we have a 1-inch layer of plastic rings. They're called airfield drain rings, basically. They're meant to replicate that 4-inch layer of pea gravel, creating an air gap. And then on top of those rings, we put a landscape fabric over the top so it keeps the sand out of them, and then the sand goes on top. So design, like I said, the two systems are designed to be very similar, designed to do the same thing. It's just a matter of which you choose to go with. Some of it sometimes just depends on what's the closest source of pea gravel versus what's the cost of oil. So how much did the plastic rings cost versus what does it cost for me to go find the pea gravel size that I need and ship it in from wherever it is. So that's why we've wound up with both versions of those fields over the years here on campus, and we've had success with them both, and you just have to kind of learn. There's nuances to managing both, and there's limitations. There's positives to one that the other doesn't have, and then the same thing. Like there's things that are negative about one that the other one is more beneficial for.
At least you're able to provide examples of what that is through practical experience as well. You've got it, and you're going to work with it.
Yeah,
work to the best that you can with the materials that you have. I find that fascinating. Especially cohesion of water and just keeping that water where it needs to be.
Yeah. So I had one of my professors in undergraduate school gave me and this is how good of an example it was that it stuck in my head. Like when you talk about the perched water table, he took a big car washing sponge, basically soaked it in water, and when he picked it up horizontally, it didn't hardly drain any water. Like the sponge held it. But as soon as he turned that sponge vertically and he took it from what was a 6-inch profile and turned it and made it a 12-inch profile, all of a sudden water came pouring out of it. And that was that perfect example of how that water perches at a certain level, but then when the hydraulic column becomes so high, eventually gravity takes over and it forces that excess water out of the system. But that was the example he gave us in undergraduate school, and that's 25 years ago, and it still sticks in my head. So it shows you how good of an example it was.
Wow. Well, that's just really fascinating to me. How often do you have to? So as far as top dressing, How often do you have to top dress those fields?
So that's really debatable. I am a very, very big believer in top dressing, just because it serves a number of factors. It helps create a continuous connection between our, if we're finding ways to keep that sand. We use the same sand to top dress that we use to build the field. So it's the same sand that's in the root zone. So it's creating kind of that common bridge. We're creating a connection with sand from the surface down into the sand that's underneath. And so we maintain positive drainage at the surface. Additionally, the sand works to help keep the fields level and smooth. Also helps us reduce how much sand has been shown to help reduce thatch buildup. It just helps with the breakdown of it. And then the last thing that sand does is we are very aggressive with our sand top dressing program, because I'm trying to keep the crown of that turf grass plant covered and protected. If I can keep the crown of the plant protected where the player's shoes aren't constantly shredding it and damaging it, the field's stronger, the field's viability gets extended a lot longer through the season. And so I don't have like a set schedule, but we have top dressed. We've done 3 top dressings since we started playing since Notre Dame, just to kind of give you an example. We're very aggressive with our top dressing program here.
Yeah.
And some of that's a characteristic of the turf grass variety we have. I feel like we benefit more from it because it's such an aggressive growing Bermuda grass and it has so much top growth. Like I said, trying to get that sand in there just, helps with the player's traction too. And, you get into this later fall where temperatures start changing, your dew points, the moisture hangs around longer. A lot of coaches have this perception that fields start to get slick. When we put ryegrass, we'll do a late season ryegrass overseeding, just because the Bermuda grass starts to slow down and we want something that's actively growing and still providing green colors. So we interseed perennial ryegrass into it, not at an excessive rate, but coaches all have this perception that because ryegrass has kind of a glossy coat, and if you see the shine, they assume that means slick. And so they'll see players slip and they associate that with the ryegrass. Well, what they really need to associate it with is with the changing climate of, you've got cooler days, like it's not as hot, so we're not burning off as much moisture in the day, cooler temperatures at night. You've got that extra moisture now and your dew points are lower, and so that moisture starts weeping back up to the surface. And so the sand also helps with that. Like you kind of avoid, there's this intermediate layer between the surface and where the cleat interact, where sometimes that moisture creates what we call a slime layer. And so you add that sand in there and it's like putting a little grit in there that is just enough to keep it from being like greasy and slippery. So that's kind of the other reason that we do it.
It's just circumstantial. It's not the grass's fault.
Correct. That's what I try and tell them. I mean, same thing where, there's the old tales of back in the day, if you were going to play a team that was perceived to be faster than you, groundskeepers were known, like, we're going to raise the mowing height up to 3 inches and we're going to slow the other team down. And I'm like, well, doesn't it slow your players down too? And there's been research and studies about it. Same sort of thing. Like those are factors. It's the old wives' tales, or just misperceived perceptions of this is what I've always thought, or what a coach was always taught growing up. And it just kind of gets passed down the ranks from person to person to person. And so that's where I love the data, where I love the research that we're able to do, where you can kind of dispel some of those myths. And once again, you put the science to it and eliminate this the magical guesswork out of it.
Of course. We're all about evidence-based results.
Absolutely.
What's going on the ground. For the as far as automation, we're always looking forward to the flying cars, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure automation plays a part in the maintenance of the fields as well. Everything from water, sensors for water that helps you irrigate. As far as any kind of soil reports y'all do, is it old school? You just go in there and take some plugs out and...
Yeah. So I mean, I'm old school, but I'm new school. So I like to do what I know, because it's known and it's trusted. But at the same time, I try to embrace new things. Like I tell people, we're constantly pushing the envelope to continue to improve. Like, no matter how good we think we are, we can always be better. And so if, like I tell every single one of my employees, like, if you have an idea, if there's something you think we can do to improve, let's have that chat. And if there's a better way to do something, then I'm all for it. As long as it's, it's not costing us more time or more money, and even in some of those instances, if it makes sense and it drastically improves the field, then it's worth it. So we've dabbled into a lot of those different things. But yeah, soil testing, we still do soil testing the old school way. You just go out and pull 40 or 50 randomized plugs from throughout the playing surface area, and you mix them all up together, and we run them over to F&B Road to the soil testing laboratory, and I'll say, hey, run me my tests and let me know how we're looking. And we try and do that a couple times a year, which is probably an extreme, from a home lawn perspective. A lot of times, the adage is if you're testing your home lawn once every
3 years,
2 to 3 years, that's going to be sufficient. Like, your home lawn's not going to change that much. The reason we do it so much is because of our sand root zone, and sand has such a low cation exchange capacity. Like, they don't hold nutrients that much. So we constantly need to have a general idea, like, what's in our system, what's not, what do we need to add, what do we have enough of, because then those affect fertilizer decisions. There's no point, like, if I have all the calcium in the soil that I potentially need for the plant, do I need to invest in calcium in my fertilizer? No. And so we're trying to balance those exact same decisions about what's fiscally responsible, what's environmentally responsible, what creates the strongest, healthiest, most dense playing surface that we can. And so, if I'm just throwing out everything, then I'm wasting money, and that's money that I could be investing somewhere else, or on another, in another product or on another field.
Yes, of course. So how does our water quality play out on those fields? And you knew I was going to ask that question at some point.
Yeah. Our water quality here leaves something to be desired.
Yes,
I guess to put it nicely, I periodically, about every year or two, I'll actually, just for my own entertainment, I'll take a water sample in and have it tested just to see if, by some miracle, it's all of a sudden become great. But I remember the very first time I took a water test, got a water test report back, and it came back with the sodium absorption ratio, the SAR, was so out of alignment. It literally on the report said not recommended for plant use.
Oh.
And I went, well, that's great, because that's the only thing we're using this for. So yeah, the water definitely creates its challenge. Now, we're fortunate we also live in an area where we get a pretty decent amount of rainfall. Now, as of late, it seems like it's feast or famine, like it doesn't rain, and then when it does rain, we get 6 inches at a time instead of, if we could just get a nice 1 inch rain every single week, that would be ideal. Keep trying to talk the good Lord into that. Hasn't worked out yet, but I'm going to keep holding out hope on that one. But yeah, our water definitely creates some challenges with the salts and bicarbonates that are in it. And so, a lot of the number one question I get from people, like when it comes to irrigation and watering, they assume that we water our fields every single day. And I say that is the farthest thing from what we do, honestly. I say we actually try to extend and irrigate as little as possible, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to force the plant to grow a stronger root system. And by, depleting it or making it kind of search and go out and try and find water, that helps us do that. And the only way to do that is by watering deeply and infrequently. And so we're running long irrigation cycles, not to the point where we have runoff. And that's the difference between your home lawn and here. Is your home lawn is going to puddle up and water is going to run off a lot quicker than it is on my field, because my field has a sand-based root zone. So it's going to be able to internalize a lot more of that water. But we're trying to fill that reservoir up, and then we don't want to run water again until that reservoir is depleted to a point where the plant can't pull water from it again. That's the perfect world goal, ideal situation for us. And then what muddies the waters for us is athletic events and external events. So sometimes, like, there are times where I have to water 2 days earlier than I want to, just because if I don't, it's going to be 2 days later than I need to, because of an event. And so balancing that, but we treat it very much, like water is the valuable resource that it is. So we try and maximize what we're getting and what we're using it and how we're using it and when. And then dealing with, the hope is hopefully after a period where we've had to irrigate a bunch for a long period because we haven't had rain like we are in right now. You hope you get one of those good rains, because those rains for us, especially with our sand-based root zones, those are, I always tell people, no matter what, nothing beats the water from the sky. Like you can see instant, like the day after we see a difference from a rainfall versus if I've been irrigating with our in-house system for a month, just because that rainfall is pure and it comes in and it actually helps do what we call it flushes all those bad parts, all the bicarbonates, all the sodium out of our system, and so we kind of get a fresh reset and restart. But then when we get into periods of longer periods where we don't have rainfall, there's some products that we experiment with that are helping to hopefully remove, we're still using our irrigation water, so we're using bad water to try and flush things from bad water, but we'll use some acidifying products that will help, kind of flush some of those bicarbonates and stuff out of the soil. So it's balancing those things, and that's kind of even a newer realm thing for me to work on and figure out. There's a lot of the products on the market, so figuring out like what's good, what works. I found a couple that I like that we've stuck with.
Do you work with specialists from the university themselves as far as water?
We haven't really done anything with water, just because part of it, like, there's nothing they can do about it to change it unless we're going to add in, a water treatment system,
yes,
which is going to be financially limiting, especially for my situation, because I would need one at every single facility. So like one of the local golf courses here, one of our high-end private courses, they actually have a sulfur injection system that's tied into their irrigation, so they can actually go in and they'll add sulfur. That's the other thing, like the pH of our water is extremely high.
Yep.
Our pH is, I think the last test I had, it was 8.2. So when you combine that with, our sands come in at a high pH. So our fields are in the upper 7s to low 8s as far as a pH range go, which is far from the ideal of the 6.5 to 7 that they recommend for turf grass. And so like they have an acid injection system, but that works for them because all of their water comes from the same one source, so they only have one place they have to treat it. Versus here, I would have to install a system into every single field and facility, or campus would have to install one campus-wide.
Just not practical, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Yep. We just have, like you were saying earlier, you just send in those samples and you get results back, and you just adjust as you go.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then, I mean, you asked about automation. We are experimenting with automation in other areas. We do use soil moisture sensors. I used to have in the ground ones that we left permanently. The limitation to that was the only time that only gave me data for that specific spot so I might have 3 sensors in a 2-acre field that tells me the exact location. But if I want to get a broader picture of, that's assuming uniformity across everything, which you can't really ever assume, no matter how good you think things are built, and just it's inherent. This area gets more sunlight or less sunlight, and so it's the microclimates within the climates create variability naturally. And so we've actually gone to above ground sensors where we can literally walk around and stick the thing in the ground and check a reading at any given location that we want. And then we use that to try and help make some of our irrigation system decisions as far as where we run, how long we run. Do we go out and aerify? If a certain area is staying wet, we'll go out and spot treat, aerify that one spot and maybe not the entire surface, because we just have to focus on that one point that's not draining as well, whether it's because of compaction or whatever it may be. So then we've also started looking into like equipment automation even as well. Like I've got a robotic striping machine for painting fields. We don't use it on everything. We still do Kyle Field kind of old school way. But like our football practice fields, I've taken painting every single week we have to paint the practice fields for the football team. And that used to be a 6 to 9 person job that would last 2 to 3 hours. Well, with this robotic machine, I can bring in one person, or 2, and it takes a little longer, but it's all about efficiencies and then trying to balance work life for my team, just because we're managing so many different things with events, that like if I don't give them a little bit of relief, they're going to be here 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and that's just not sustainable. So trying to balance things like that. I've even actually just this last year required a couple of robotic lawnmowers that we have running in a couple of different areas. Just, then we don't have to, I can send them out and they mow in the middle of the night. And so whenever, our track and field is one of the areas that we're using one. So they're notorious. I don't always know their practice schedule. And so this is one thing, like that mower goes out, it runs every single night. When they show up in the morning, whether they want to go practice at 8:30 in the morning or if it's at 2:30 in the afternoon, the mowing on that surface is already done. And it goes out and it does it every single night. And,
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And it's technology. It appeals to these younger generation. Like our industry is actually seeing a little bit of a, we're not seeing as many people go into the industry, and whether that's they don't know about it or whether it's just lack of who knows what the reason is. But it's getting harder and harder to find people that want to come do what we do. And so a lot of times if you can't get more people, you've got to supplement it somehow. And so it's how do you balance that, and then I'll throw in the fact that it seems like every year our workload continues to increase. So we have to do more with less. And so finding other ways, creative ways, or taking advantage of the technology that's in front of us and utilizing it to our benefit is what we try and do.
Wow, that's fantastic. Being able to make that investment to bring in more efficiencies to the operation.
I wish I had the robot mower for my house, because everybody, they come in and they see Kyle Field or Olson Field and they're like, man, I bet your lawn looks amazing, and I'll be like, no, it's the exact opposite. What's the old saying? The barber's kid has the longest hair. Well,
that's right.
That's my lawn. I'm like, my lawn's lucky if I can mow it once a week because I'm here.
I get the same thing. Your lawn or your garden must look fantastic. I'm like, yeah, I'll show you pictures of it on a good day.
Yep. So and then the same thing, like my lawn. I'm like, I have an irrigation system in my lawn and I have Bermuda grass, but I'm like, I'm kind of a cheapskate. I'm like, I don't need to pay for all that water just for my ego to have a green lawn. So like right now my lawn's kind of burnt up and a little bit of brown, and I'm like, it'll start raining and it's Bermuda grass, so fortunately it'll come back. Now if it was St. Augustine, I would probably have to water a little bit just to make sure that it survived all the heat and dry conditions. But so it's one of those things I was like, I'll keep it alive, but I don't need it to look like Augusta National.
There you go. So the grass that you do have, the cultivars that y'all are using, of course. So there are some practices that homeowners will incorporate into their own maintenance schedule. Deep and infrequent watering, that seems to be consistent across the board. Fertilization schedule really should be based on some sort of evidence of a deficiency, right? And oftentimes that's from testing.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like I said, it's wasteful to, if it's there, it's wasteful to put it out. So from their standpoint, like, use the testing, use the resources available, and let that drive your decisions. So
for the grass cultivars that you're using, so I had a resident send me an email, and they said, what kind of St. Augustine grass do you recommend? And then, I'm looking at all these different cultivars. I'm like, well, what is the most practical for this individual? For us and for you in the fields themselves, you're working with cultivars that are specific to that function, right? Not really available to the general public.
Actually, most, like the Bermuda grass varieties we're using, the public can get.
Really?
So, we have a Bermuda grass variety that we've primarily gone to. It's called Latitude 36 Bermuda grass. Mm-hmm. It's a hybrid Bermuda grass. It is available. We get it out of from a sod producer just down in the Austin area. But yeah, any average homie, if they called them up and said, hey, I want a pallet of that, they would be able to buy it. So it's, I say you want to select your turf grass variety based on kind of your environmental condition. Like if you've got a lawn and your house has a bunch of trees, you don't want to put Bermuda grass in.
That's right.
Because Bermuda grass needs full sunlight. If you start putting it in shade, it's just going to dwindle and it's going to get thin and wispy, and eventually you're going to have no grass there. And so, like in that situation, a homeowner needs to either put in St. Augustine or zoysia grass. Yeah. Versus like, and the same thing, like I'm not going to go put St. Augustine in on a football field because it doesn't have the wear tolerance and recuperative ability that the Bermuda grasses do. And so it's all about selecting function and form and making a match for every given situation and what works. And it's the same thing. Like a homeowner needs to ask themselves, if they have a St. Augustine lawn, what are their pain points? Is it disease? Is it water? Is it all because that's the differences that you see in these varieties. One variety might have a better disease resistance against brown patch or against St. Augustine decline, but it might have, a high water need. Or if you want something that's super water efficient, then maybe it's more disease susceptible. Now, there's a lot of, and that's one of the, Texas A&M actually has a phenomenal turfgrass breeding program specifically for St. Augustines and zoysias. We don't do Bermudas, but Texas A&M and AgriLife Research has we have one of the top turfgrass breeders in the world with our St. Augustine and zoysia grass development program. And so those are all the factors that she's looking at, is like developing St. Augustines that are more, because that's one of the big things. Like St. Augustine needs a lot of water to survive. So creating or developing and breeding varieties that are more drought tolerant and more water efficient, and but still offer disease or insect resistance, and trying to create that perfect plant that's probably not possible to truly create, but trying to build all those things, all the positives in that you can.
Yeah. So you mentioned what was the Bermuda grass variety that you mentioned?
Latitude 36.
Latitude 36.
So it was actually, don't shun me. It was developed at Oklahoma State University, actually.
Oh, it's all right.
And it was bred for its cold tolerance, honestly. So it was designed, or what their goal for it was for it to be used in those transition zone areas of the United States, so that you could grow Bermuda grass further north. That was one of those things. When I was at Virginia Tech, it was an experimental grass at our research center, and it was one of those ones that caught my eye. And so I kind of paid attention to it, watched it go from a research, experimental number to where it actually got a name, and then it went to market and came down here. And I was like, well, man, one of our biggest pain points from an athletic standpoint is, I talked about how we do the ryegrass overseeding. We do that as a necessity because when we get to, in about a 2-week time period, we get to the day lengths are shorter, so they're cooler temperatures, shorter day length. We're not getting as much sunlight, and I talked about how Bermuda grass loves sunlight. So you combine all those things, and the Bermuda grass starts to slow down, and so that's why we overseed with the ryegrass. Well, my initial idea, and I'm like, well, I wonder if I bring one of these cold-tolerant Bermuda grasses in, can I get away? Do I not have to overseed at all? Or can I at least significantly reduce my ryegrass overseeding rate? Because the pain point on the ryegrass is in the spring. That grass, through the winter and through the spring, if we leave it in the fields, it's competing with the Bermuda grass for sunlight, which it's already struggling to get enough. It's competing with it for water, for nutrients. And so you hit this point where in the spring, when you finally let the ryegrass die off, you've got this really thin, you'll wind up with all these thin bare patches because the Bermuda grass has been out-competed for the last 4 months. And then we have to start this whole cycle of okay, now we got to grow it back in, get it ready. So the thought process was maybe even if I can't completely eliminate the need to overseed, can I cut my ryegrass rate in half? Can I go from having to put 15 pounds per 1,000 square feet of ryegrass out to, can I get away with putting 7 out? And now all of a sudden my transition, that's half the amount of ryegrass out there competing with the Bermuda. And now all of a sudden my Bermuda comes back better. So, but.
Oh my goodness. That's a lot of juggling. That's for darn sure. But, at least with the track record that you have and the evidence that you've been, the data you've been collecting all these years, I'm sure it eases that somewhat.
Yeah. I mean, I would be lying if I said I didn't I thrive on a challenge. So for me, it's fun. Trying to find what's the new inventive way that we can what's our new obstacle and how do we overcome it? This year on Kyle Field, it's we've got a new paint scheme on the field, and so now it's okay, paint isn't great for grass. I always give people the analogy of, I said, everybody remembers COVID, right? And they're like, yeah. And I said, you remember when we all had to walk around wearing masks all the time when we were around each other? And they're like, yeah. And I said, and none of us liked it because it was hard to breathe? And they're like, yeah. And I said, well, that's what I do to that grass plant every time I paint it. Because I'm putting a mask over its face, like, because grass is like us. It has to breathe. It respires. It takes in and exchanges air. And so
That's right.
when I put that paint on it, it's covering some of those stomatal openings, and it's restricting its ability to breathe. And it's blocking light from the leaf, which is its solar panel. It's how it gathers its energy. And so, like, that's our new challenge this year is, like, how do we manage this new paint scheme and try and keep the grass as healthy and, growing to where at the end of the year we don't get down to where we're just bare sand on the ground, hopefully.
Yes.
So, but it's, like I said, it's one of those, I revel in the challenge because it's a new challenge. And that's one of the great things, the things I love about my job is because I get to work with all these different sports and all these different events, and none of them are the same. And then you throw in the Mother Nature factor, and no 2 days are ever alike. And so I get a new day, a new challenge every single day.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, it sounds like a very successful career and one that is continued to grow for you, right? Pun intended.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I still think I hope I have a ways to go, and a lot of people, I think that, for me, it's about influencing the next generation. Is kind of where I'm at now. Like, originally when I started in it, it was, I think we all start out with me. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to be, and then I think the longer you do it, you start to realize it's not about me. It's about, there's greater things beyond it. And so I hit that point, a number of years back where, it's now about advancing the profession and the industry and helping create that next generation of people that are going to carry it forward and be the people that, if I'm at this level, they're going to take it to the whole next notch and the whole next level. And there's going to be someone behind them. And so working on their development is kind of where my passion lies now.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, sir, this is a great example of a successful career, one that you're continuing to give back through your profession, as well as mentorship of those students that are coming in, as well as the staff that you're managing. Y'all are doing an outstanding job for the university, for those stadiums, and for the public, but especially for the athletes that are out there, putting their cleats in the ground.
Yeah.
So thank you
Like
for
I
all
said,
the service you're providing.
Very welcome. Like I said, it's fun. I enjoy it, and I always tell my wife, like, the day I stop enjoying it is the day that I need to find something else to do. And so I'm very fortunate I haven't hit that point yet. Someday I probably will, but today's not that day.
Well, Nick, I thank you very much for joining us today on Garden Success. Folks, if y'all have any questions about any of the content that we've had today, again, this was a recorded program, but we'd love to receive your comments, your questions, as well as your successes or correlations with what you're doing and what you've heard today. Email gardensuccess@tamu.edu. Of course, next week we'll be back in the saddle. On Thursday, we start at noon and we finish at 1 o'clock, but we'd love to have your participation. This is Stephen Brueggerhoff, horticulture agent with Brazos County AgriLife Extension, wishing you a good day, garden success for yourself, and of course, as always, I'll see you in the garden.
You've been listening to Garden Success with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension horticulturist Stephen Brueggerhoff. Join us again next week as Stephen discusses your questions about gardening and landscaping in the Brazos Valley.
Garden Success is brought to you in part by Martha's Bloomers, featuring an expansive collection of plants and tools for the gardener, a boutique filled with art and home decor, and an award-winning full-service restaurant featuring handcrafted meals and a wide selection of hot teas and desserts. Located on Highway 6 in Navasota.